Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive you won't soon forget. We're going to be tackling basic numeracy today, and we've got a great document to guide us. It's fascinating how numeracy, it's everywhere. It's not just about, balancing your checkbook.
No, not at all. It's really about thinking critically, making sense of the world, whether you're looking at data, making decisions, or even just noticing patterns, numeracy skills can really help you navigate things.
Okay, so this document, it jumps right into Chapter 1, Numbers and Variables. It starts with the basics, the different types of numbers, laying the groundwork. You've got natural numbers, integers, and real numbers. And they explain it all without getting too technical.
Yeah, it's like they're giving you the tools, right? Natural numbers are for counting things. Integers, you need those when you're dealing with values below zero, like temperatures or debts. And then real numbers. Well, they're everything in between. It's a whole spectrum.
And to help picture it, they use a number line, which is so smart. It shows how those integers, they're just specific points on a line that represents all the real numbers. You suddenly see the big picture, how all these numbers fit together.
Exactly. That's key. You start to get a sense of infinity, how numbers just keep going forever. And on that line, you have integers as these markers, and then all those other numbers filling in the spaces.
Like a roadmap for numbers. And speaking of practical stuff, they talk about rounding, something we all do, probably without even realizing it. But they explain, when it's okay to round and when it can cause problems, like with interest rates.
Oh, absolutely. Rounding can have a big impact on calculations, especially over time. Think about compound interest. A tiny difference can really add up. So they're stressing the importance of precision, really understanding what rounding means in different situations.
Now comes the part that might make some people nervous, variables. Those symbols. But they explain it so well. Variables are basically just placeholders for numbers we don't know yet. And they use a good example, the area of a rectangle, length times width.
Right. They're highlighting how variables can represent relationships between things. So we can create formulas that work in a lot of different situations, like a blueprint for problem solving.
And they even point out that acronyms, like PV for present value, those can be variables too. It's a little hint at how they'll be used in those financial calculations later on. Okay, on to Chapter 2, Basic Operations on Numbers and Variables. First, they quickly review the 4 basic operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division.
Like a warm-up before the big game. They're making sure you've got those fundamentals down. They're essential for everything else.
And then it gets interesting. They focus on the order of operations. Remember PEMDAS or bottom ES. They really emphasize how important it is to follow that order. Otherwise, you get totally different answers.
Yeah, consistency is key. Without a clear order, math would just be a mess. Like speaking different languages, you wouldn't understand each other.
They have a great example showing how messing up the order gives you a totally wrong answer. Really makes you pay attention. Next up, like and unlike terms. The idea that you can only add or subtract terms that have the same variables. Kind of like you can't add apples and oranges.
It's about simplifying things. Grouping like terms, combining them, it makes the equations much easier to work with.
Then when they get to multiplying and dividing with variables, they introduce this cool thing, cancellation. Terms just disappear, which is very satisfying.
Cancellation is a powerful tool. It lets you focus on what's important. Not just making it look neat, but revealing patterns, making connections.
All right, so we've got the basics down. Time for Chapter 3, more operations on numbers. This is where things get a little more nuanced.
Oh yeah, they start with prime factorization, finding the highest common factor and the lowest common multiple. All about understanding how numbers are built, how they relate to each other.
Prime factorization, they explain how every number can be written as this unique product of prime numbers, like finding the secret code for each number. And once you get that, the HCF and LCM, they become much easier.
Exactly. And they emphasize these aren't just abstract ideas, they have practical uses. Like if you're baking, trying to divide ingredients evenly, or figuring out when 2 things will happen at the same time, HCF and LCM can help with that.
Now get ready, we're going into fraction territory. They cover the types, how to simplify them, and why you need a common denominator for addition and subtraction.
Fractions can be tricky, but they're so important for representing parts of a whole. The document really stresses understanding what they mean, how they relate.
And they point out a common mistake people make, canceling across numerators and denominators when adding or subtracting fractions. We've probably all done it, but now we know better.
Yeah, it's easy to slip up if you don't really get what fractions are about. It's not just about the symbols, it's about the whole concept of parts and wholes.
Then they tie everything together, fractions, decimals, percentages, showing how they're all just different ways of expressing the same value. And they've got real-world examples for each one. Percentages for discounts, decimals for money, fractions for sharing.
It's about having the right tool for the job, like
Yeah.
a toolbox full of different wrenches. You choose the one that fits.
Okay, time to move on to Chapter 4. And this is where we get into the practical world of...
Measurements.
You got it. Get ready to explore the SI system. Thankfully, no more trying to figure out how many medieval handspans are in a meter.
Right. The SI system is all about clarity, making things standard. It's like a universal language for measuring, so everyone can communicate clearly. They talk about how important that is for science, engineering, international trade.
They start with length, the units we use most often. Kilometers for long distances, meters for everyday things, centimeters for smaller measurements, millimeters for tiny details. And the best part, converting between them is easy. They're all multiples of 10.
Yeah, like having a measuring stick with different markings, different levels of detail. You pick the one that makes sense for what you're measuring.
Next, they get into perimeter, which is the total distance around a shape. Like if you were measuring how much fencing you need for a yard. And they explain it for different shapes, rectangles, squares, triangles, even circles.
Perimeter is all about boundaries, right? The edge of a field, the outline of a building, even the crust of a pizza. You're figuring out the total length of the line that encloses it.
Then it's on to area, which is about the size of a surface, like how much carpet you'd need for a floor. They use the square meter as the basic unit, but then they introduce the hectare for larger areas, like fields or parks.
The hectare is useful for measuring land because, well, square kilometers would give you these huge numbers. Hectares are much easier to work with.
They explain the formulas for the area of different shapes, rectangles, squares, triangles, circles, connecting the square meter to things we understand, like tiles. Then they dive into volume, which is the amount of space something takes up.
Volume takes us into 3D, right? Measuring how much a container can hold, the amount of liquid in a tank, or the space a building occupies.
They start with a basic cube, which is easy to picture. Then they go on to prisms and cylinders. And they even mention that knowing how to calculate the volume of a pipe, well, that'll come in handy for those financial calculations later. Ooh, a little foreshadowing.
I like how they connect geometry to finance. Like the volume of a pipe can represent how money flows in an annuity, something we'll be talking about soon. Shows how math is everywhere.
And of course they explain how liters, which we use for liquids, relate to cubic units, which we use for solids. It's a practical tip that shows how everything's connected. Okay, get ready, because Chapter 5 takes us into the exciting world of...
expressions, equations, and formulas.
That's right. Algebra is taking center stage now, but they explain it all really clearly, no confusing jargon.
They start by defining the differences between those three things. It's the foundation for understanding algebra. An expression is like a phrase. An equation is a whole sentence saying two things are equal and a formula. That's a special equation showing a relationship.
Then they explain what it means to solve an equation. It's like finding the missing piece of a puzzle, the value that makes it true. And they emphasize using inverse operations, basically doing the opposite to isolate the variable.
It's all about balance. You do the same thing to both sides of the equation to keep things equal while you're figuring out that variable, like a carefully planned dance of math steps.
They even show you how to check your answer. You plug it back into the original equation to make sure you didn't make a mistake, like double-checking your work, which is always a good idea.
It's an important habit to get into, checking your solutions, making sure your reasoning is sound, a skill that's useful beyond math class for sure.
All right, we've conquered equations. Now we're stepping into the visual world.
It's straight lines.
Time for some graphing. They start with a quick introduction to the Cartesian plane, that grid with the x and y axes, like a map for numbers.
It's a powerful tool, the Cartesian plane. You can visualize relationships between variables, make abstract things concrete. A bridge between numbers and shapes.
But they don't spend too long on the basics. They quickly get to the equation of a straight line, explaining slope as steepness, how it relates to real things, like the incline of a road or how fast something changes over time.
The equation of a straight line, it's a fundamental concept. You can describe and predict linear relationships, which are used everywhere. Modeling business growth, predicting the path of a projectile.
They even walk you through plotting a line using the equation, connecting it back to solving for variables, showing how it all builds on what we've learned. And now, for the grand finale of this part of our deep dive.
Basic financial calculations.
That's it. Chapter 7 is where it all comes together. We're going to see how numeracy can help us make smart financial decisions.
They start with simple interest, explaining the formula and what each part means in a way that's easy to understand. Simple interest is the basis for understanding how money grows.
They have real-world examples, like calculating the interest on a loan. Shows you how this stuff applies in everyday life.
What they're emphasizing is that interest can work both ways. It's what you pay when you borrow, but it's also what you earn when you lend. Understanding that is key for making good financial choices.
And then they introduce
Compound interest.
the snowball effect. This is where it gets exciting, seeing how interest can earn interest and how that leads to exponential growth over time.
Compound interest, it's a powerful force, especially over long periods. It's the key to building wealth through investing. The sooner you start, the better.
They even use a timeline to show the compounding period so you can really visualize it. It's like watching that snowball get bigger and bigger. Now let's take a break here. We'll come back to explore the rest of these fascinating financial concepts in Afaronal. Part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Last time we were just about to get into annuities. They're like financial time machines.
That's a great way to put it. So these annuities, it's basically a series of equal payments made over a period of time. And the cool thing is you can calculate both future value, like what those payments will be worth later on, and present value, what those future payments are worth right now.
The document really stresses how important it is to understand, like, the time value of money. $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow because you could be earning interest or returns on it. Annuities help us grasp that idea and make better financial decisions.
Yeah, and they have some really good examples, like figuring out how much you need to save each month to hit a specific retirement goal. I mean, that's something we all think about, right?
For sure. Annuities are a great tool for planning for those long-term goals. Retirement, a down payment on a house, even a dream vacation. When you get how annuities work, you can really take control of your finances.
So we've covered simple interest, compound interest, annuities. What about when you, take out a loan? That's where amortization comes in, doesn't it?
Exactly. Amortization is all about breaking down those loan payments over time. Remember the water pipe from Chapter 4? Well, they use that as an example here, showing how each payment is split between paying off the interest and reducing the principal amount.
Like you're gradually emptying that pipe with each payment, lowering the amount you owe. And it's cool how they connect amortization back to compound interest. You see how the interest part of each payment gets smaller as the principal goes down.
It shows how compound interest can work against you when you're in debt. The longer you take to pay off that loan, the more you're paying in interest. Makes you really think about making good borrowing decisions and understanding the terms of a loan before you sign anything.
That's a really important point. This document is full of great takeaways, so we've covered a lot of ground, different types of numbers, prime factorization, fractions, measurements, expressions, equations, straight lines, and now even finance.
It's amazing how they've woven together ideas from all those different chapters so you really get a complete understanding of numeracy. It's like putting together a puzzle, each piece builds on the others.
Yeah, it's not just about knowing how to do the math, it's about understanding what it means. Like that aha moment with the number line, seeing how integers are just these points in the vastness of real numbers, that really clicked for me.
And that focus on the order of operations shows you how important precision is in math. A tiny change can make a big difference. You need those clear rules, that step-by-step approach.
Those practical examples really help too, like calculating interest on a loan or figuring out how much to save for retirement, things everyone deals with. It feels good knowing we have the tools to handle those challenges now.
This deep dive has given you a solid foundation in basic numeracy. It's a starting point. You can explore more from here. Dive deeper into specific areas like statistics, calculus, or even financial modeling.
It's like they've opened the door to a whole new world. And even if you don't go further with math, the skills you've learned here will help you in so many ways.
It's true. Making decisions, understanding data, you can navigate our world much better now. You can analyze information, spot patterns, make sense of those numbers that are everywhere.
Speaking of making sense of things, they mentioned that calculating the volume of a pipe could be useful for financial calculations. I'm still wondering how those two things connect. They seem so different.
It's a great example of how analogies can make complex things easier to grasp. Imagine the volume of a pipe as the total amount of money flowing through an annuity. The width of the pipe could be the size of each payment, the length is how long the annuity lasts, and the flow rate. That's the interest rate.
Wow, that's a great way to visualize it. It makes annuities so much clearer.
Yeah.
I love how exploring one idea can lead to such unexpected connections.
That's what math is all about. It's a language that connects things that seem completely different. And this document has given you the basics of that language so you can understand and appreciate its beauty.
Definitely. And the most important lesson is this is just the beginning. This deep dive has made me want to learn more, to explore specific areas that I'm interested in. And I feel ready to do that, whether it's statistics, calculus, or even financial modeling.
That's the goal of education, right? To spark that passion for learning, to give people the tools and the confidence to explore. And this deep dive has done just that, giving you the foundation to keep exploring the world of numbers.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep that curiosity alive, keep asking questions, keep exploring. The world of numbers is full of surprises.
And remember, numeracy isn't just a skill, it's a way of thinking, a way of understanding, a way of engaging with the world in a much deeper way. Congrats on finishing this deep dive, and may your journey with numbers be filled with those aha moments and a love of learning that lasts a lifetime.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive, and I gotta say, this document has been amazing. So clear, so insightful. It's like they took all these complicated math ideas and made them, I don't know, accessible.
It's true, they explain things so well. Using everyday language, examples you can relate to, makes learning much more enjoyable, that's for sure.
Yeah, I really appreciate how they don't just tell you what, but also why. It's not about memorizing formulas blindly. It's about getting the concepts, the connections between them.
Exactly. When you understand the why, the formulas, they're not just symbols anymore. They become tools you can use to solve problems, to make sense of things.
Speaking of connections, remember how they mentioned that volume of a pipe thing and how it could be useful for financial calculations? I'm still kind of curious about that. How can something physical like volume relate to money and annuities?
It's a clever analogy, right? It helps you visualize a complex idea. Imagine the volume of that pipe is the total amount of money flowing through an annuity over time. The width of the pipe could represent each payment, the length is how long the annuity lasts, and the flow rate, well, that's like the interest rate.
Oh, wow. Now I get it. That makes annuities much easier to picture. It's funny how exploring one concept can lead to these, unexpected insights.
That's the power of math. It connects things that seem totally different. And this document has given us the foundation to understand that language, to see its beauty.
For sure. And the biggest takeaway for me is this is just the start. This deep dive has made me want to learn more, to go deeper into certain areas. Statistics, calculus, even financial modeling. I feel like I can tackle them now.
And that's what's great about education. It sparks that curiosity, gives you the tools and the confidence to explore. This deep dive has done that for us, given us the foundation to keep going with numbers.
Absolutely. So to our listener, don't let that curiosity fade away. Keep asking those questions. Yeah. Keep exploring. The world of numbers is full of surprises.
And remember, numeracy is more than just a skill. It's a way of thinking, a way of understanding, of engaging with the world in a more meaningful way. Congratulations on finishing this deep dive. May your journey with numbers be filled with those aha moments and a love of learning that never ends.